For centuries.
And I wanted to come in and say good evening to each and every one of you. This is the program Indaba, a program that seeks to find consensus on issues which affect African lives here in Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and across the African diaspora. Now, the program is hosted by the Emancipation Support Committee, and it's coming to you live from Talk City's studios here in 11A Marval Road in Daba. Our listening audience, we want to welcome you in, and we begin today's edition, of course, with Dr. Claudius Fergus, Director of the Education and Research and also Shabaka Kambon. Let me just bring them into studio. Hold on one second here. Hello and good evening.
Good evening, Karen, and welcome. We welcome your audience to Indaba for another edition of Indaba, the program where knowledge grows, the program of the Emancipation Support Committee. We welcome also our viewers and listeners on social media, YouTube and Facebook. Shabaka, you are still muted. This evening, we are going to talk about the post-electoral situation with respect to reparations in particular. We are also going to get an update on what's going on at Shashamane in Ethiopia. And of course, today was a big day across the globe where people in various cities expressed solidarity for Burkina Faso and its leader, Ibrahim Traore. Of course, Indaba, the Emancipation Support Committee, the Caribbean Freedom Project, the National Committee on Reparations, all expressed solidarity through our various platforms this evening. Next week, the Africa Report will address some of the key issues and reactions, not only with respect to the International Solidarity Day, but with respect to what has been happening for the couple past weeks as well, and reactions throughout Africa. So that's the Africa Report for next week. I hope you look forward to that and join us for a discussion on that issue. It's very important. We are all concerned, those people who understand the threat of imperialism to Africa and what Burkina Faso represents in terms of hope, in terms of progress, in terms of genuine revolution that seeks to overthrow neocolonialism and all of its tentacles. But of course, colonialism always fights back, imperialism always fights back. So we are not surprised, but we are not prepared to let the imperial forces succeed this time. So we will continue to mobilize against those forces and to ensure that the revolution continues and the revolution presents a model for the genuine transformation of the African continent. Welcome, my brother Shabaka.
Good night, Doctor. And of course, like the listeners on the outside tonight, I'm excited about tonight's program to find out more about what happened today. If we could get in a couple words, I know there was an event down at the Kwame Ture Center. The elections, of course, we're gonna have Brother David Abdullah later this evening, and he was just on the news tonight making some interesting comments. And of course, now we have a very special brother. He is a really highly respected brother inside the Rastafarian community. For many years, he has presided over a particular a community down in Diego Martin, where they would annually send one of their members to Shashamane, the land promised by Haile Selassie, on a one-way ticket, indeed. and he has now himself, repatriated to the continent. And of course, we're going to be getting a chance to hear from him what that experience has been like. And of course, that land, just to put things into perspective, the land in Ethiopia that they refer to as Shashamani, that land was given as a gift to members of the diaspora in the 1950s by the late King Haile Selassie, after, Africans across the diaspora in the United States of America and the Caribbean in particular had volunteered and in many cases returned to Ethiopia to fight for the freedom of that land when the Italians invaded under the fascist leader Mussolini. And so Brother Levi is going to speak to us about the beautiful things and the challenges involved in that process. Good night, Brother Levi. Welcome to Indaba.
Greetings, my brethren. Greetings, one and all. It is a pleasure for me to address my people in any aspect, anytime, any day. Give thanks to Indaba for having me, and I will always do my very best to represent to all the communities that call on the ancestors and believe in the tradition of African movements.
Yes. Well, brother, let me start by saying that, I was fortunate on one occasion to be inside the 12 Tribes community hall, the headquarters in Diego Martin, when during one of those ceremonies where you called on members of your congregation, you asked, who found it, the exact words escape me now, but
who is ready?
Who is fitting? Who is ready to make that return trip to the motherland? And you explained that it was a one-way trip and that the community would pay for that person who was willing to make that, to take that challenge. And somebody did stand up and to be counted. So it was a phenomenal thing that I don't think many people across the country and across the region knows that something like this actually happens in our community. So let me say that was an extraordinary experience. And now let's start talking about what happens after a brother or a sister elects to make that journey back home.
Well, give thanks for that auspicious introduction. We, the 12 Tribe of Israel, which was founded in Trinidad since 1977, have been sending our brethren and sisters to Ethiopia. First, we sent 25 people to visit so that they could come back and tell the people that there is land there for us and we can send people to live. And then we start off sending 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then we send 5 sisters, then we send 7 sisters, and then we start to send people to live. And we've been doing that through the years till up to recently. I think 2 years ago we sent 2 people. No, we sent a couple of years ago we sent 5 people, 6 people, right? And then we sent 2 people of recent, and then we have 2 people right now is prepared to leave. They're just waiting to finalize some of the documents and things, and we waited to send these 2 people. Now, when we 12 Tribe of Israel sending people to Ethiopia to live, because as we are a repatriation-born organization, we raise our funds in different ways. We have celebration, dance, and different fundraising. Like one time coming up just now, we having a bus ride to Togo. We have mountain dance that we raise funds. We have contribution from our members. And that's how we gather our funds to pay the ticket and send the brethren and sisters. When we buy a ticket for our brethren and sisters, or 2 brothers who see it fitting, we go to the gathering and we ask, anybody see it fitting and ready to leave to go and live in Ethiopia? And if any, sometimes more come up. And if 2 or 3 come up, we say, well, what year you join, what year you join? And we pick out of those people right? And we send them, when we send them off, we give each person, we buy the ticket, we pay for all the visas, everything, and we also give them 2,500 US to travel with as start off. Because you see it fit in, so that means you must have something. Either we always try to program members to get a trade, get a skill, get certified, because Africa awaits its creator. So when you go in Africa, you must know you're going to do something to help to build.
Indeed. And brother, listen, today for today's program, I decided to go on the internet and go to find video footage of Shashamani, of the land. And I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but the shots that I saw give me the impression that we're talking about a vast area, something of a grassland, not very green, but sort of semi-arid grassland, but vast and
No,
beautiful.
in Ethiopia, we have two, well, I would say like two seasons, right? They have the rainy season and the dry season. In the rainy season, the places, especially like Shashamani, is very green. But in the dry season, which is like from January come up to like before January, from like September coming down to January, it is very dry. So that is the time when the people prepare the land, for planting. So sometimes when you see the land, you might see the land looking dry, and like if from my experience, the first time I went to Ethiopia, I was frightened because I thought, I said, wait, now it's a desert I come in, because I went in January. But
Right.
there's a saying that where there is no vision, the people perish. So when I see the Amasa land, I say, wait, it had to have something good for this land. So I didn't bring back a report and say, well, it's a desert you're going in. I bring back a report and say that there is land for all of us.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is beautiful land,
Yeah.
And so tell me, what has the community of Caribbean people who've been going back home, because it's not just Trinidadians, there would be Jamaicans, Guyanese, and other people from across the region, going back to that promised land. What kind of development has taken place since that repatriation exercise has begun?
Well, Ethiopia, one of the things that Ethiopia wants a lot of is English teachers, because they want to be able to correspond with the rest of the world, and being their language is Amharic. The main language is Amharic. There is also Oromo, the Oromo language. So, but the main language is Amharic, and they want to bring their people in tune with the rest of the world. So they want a lot of English teachers. So we have people from the West who went back to Africa who is teachers. Some of them is agriculturists, so who doing farming. Some of them are builders who are doing construction work, building houses and rearing animals. As I was saying before, Africa with its creator. So when you're going back to Africa, you have to try to have a plan. Where am I going to fit in? It had brothers who was doing craft in the West and went back there and doing craft and doing well. But then there's, as we know in our society of people, you will find the ones who just want to go to Africa and they just drop in Africa. But at the end of the day, there is something for everybody. And what the community needs to do most of all is bind together and do big things.
So I know that, the Rastafarian community is good at that. But let me ask you about the challenges. One of the things that comes across quite clearly is the challenge of citizenship for Caribbean people. I understand that there's been some developments in that area. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I am privy to have a citizenship or a ID card, something like a green card. Right? I have been fortunate to get mine. I just renew mine because when you after 5 years, you have to renew your green card, as you know, other places now. So I was privy to get my own, and I can travel in and out of Ethiopia on a one-way ticket. So I don't have to get no visa and differently. But it have people who didn't get their own and who are still trying to get their own, because we had some challenges with there is the JRDC, which is the Jamaican Rastafari community, and then there's the EWF, which is the Ethiopian World Federation, and um, they were taking in members or making a list to present to the immigration so the brethren and sisters could get their ID, because we were out of ID, without ID for many years. That our brethren who was living in the land for 40, 50 years, and they didn't have no status. So some of them couldn't leave, because if you had to leave, anybody who overstayed their time, they have to pay, like, I think it's something like 20 US a day.
Right. Yeah,
Overstay.
it would be onerous to try to, without being regularized. Yes, it would be a
Yes, what people do now, when a person reach to Ethiopia, if they so desire to come back out, they would try to get the ID before they come out, because if you try to come out before that, then the government will want to hit you with a heavy tax, which I think is very sad for Africans returning. And I wish that the powers that be, seeing that we are part of this great movement of Africa, the diaspora, I think we have to try and do something, because when we are not foreigners going in Africa to live, we are Africans returning home because we were taken out of home. So we would like, while we are coming together and dealing with it, we want to get to the African Union and different organizations which can even petition for us to alleviate all those trial and tribulation that we face with ID. When you go to Africa, as you know now, many Europeans, the Africans are opening their eyes and saying, but wait till you go walk in, we place just so. And when we go into all the place, we have to get visa. So we would like it to reach to this stage, because that is one of the greatest challenges we have. Like, for instance, me who have a ID, right? There's a circulation that the government has put out and says, give us all the different things that we can do. And they say we can do everything except join the army and vote when you have this ID.
Right. But Brother Levi, have you? I know that our previous chair was an executive member of ECOSOC in the African Union. And I know that the Emancipation Support Committee and CPAN continue to maintain ties with important individuals within the African Union, with the African Union as an entity. Have you tried, talking to Sister Zakia about the ESC and CPAN intervening on behalf of this community?
Well, the last time when there was a meeting in UWI, I mentioned it to my brother. You remember, Dr. Fergus?
I can't recall.
We were standing outside and I was talking and I was
Oh,
mentioning.
that's recently. I thought you were talking about a long time ago. Yeah, that's recently. That one.
I was saying, we need to adjust the situation, because many people facing these challenges, what I mean? And everybody have a work to do, right? And if we could come together, and everybody who have a position and know somebody who they can talk to and who can petition on behalf of us. Because remember now, I might be able to gather the troops. I mightn't be able to buy a plane and send everybody, but I might be able to get them ready in the readiness. So the next person who could take up that mantle and take it to the next level, we appreciate that. Like I think Ralph Gonzalez, Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalez, he had a bilateral agreement with the Ethiopian government that the brothers and sisters of St. Vincent didn't need visa to go to Ethiopia. So it because he petitioned for that.
Yeah. So the precedent is there that Caribbean leaders and influencers can make some can have some impact or influence in Ethiopia.
Yeah,
okay. That's something that we need to look into. I know that Sister Zach is going to be listening, and I know that she can. I'm sure that she can pick up the telephone and speak to the right people to influence this process. So we have to put this on the agenda. I don't know that it has ever been on the agenda before, but listening to you tonight, brother, I have to say that I understand that it must be on the agenda going forward.
Yeah, because even in other African places, I did hear something, and I can't confirm it, but Ibrahim Traore was saying, the people of the diaspora need to come home, they need to repatriate, and then you come to Burkina Faso, you're supposed to get citizenship. Other countries offering citizenship to us, but it still have certain loopholes and certain things that people who really just want to repatriate, who want to go home, we still facing certain challenges, and we need to kind of alleviate these challenges.
Well, brother, listen, we're coming to the end of this segment, but I want people who are interested, having heard you tonight, and I'm sure you would have generated a lot of interest across the country, particularly in the Rastafarian community, who want to get in touch with you and reach out to you and find out more about the work that you're doing. Could you give them a way to get in touch?
Well, we are the 12 Tribe of Israel. I am the overseer for the 12 Tribe of Israel, Trinidad, and I also function with the All Mansions of Rastafari. And the All Mansions of Rastafari have a Facebook page. The 12 Tribe of Israel also have a Facebook page. You can reach out to me at 3060134. That is 3060134. And I'm always willing, I'm always willing to talk and share my knowledge with anybody across the board.
Thank you, brother Trini Levi. Yeah, man, one of the great elders of the Rastafarian movement of the Caribbean today, and a voice that is sharing with us, from both sides of the Atlantic. Thank you, brother. Thanks for being with us here tonight on Indaba.
Before he leaves, just one quick comment from him. What do you think, Brother Clyde, about the new buzzword in terms of return to Africa, rematriation rather than repatriation? Just a quick comment on that.
Well, in the words of His Imperial Majesty, the translation remains one and the same. Because we will call it all kind of different things, but at the end of the day, all we want to do is give peace a chance.
To go back. Okay, I take that as an answer for now. Thank you very much, and we will be seeing you again sometime soon.
I am always willing, right? Give thanks.
Thank you, brother. One love, one love.
Thank you.
Yes, and I understand, Dr. Fergus, that we want to, Brother Levi, you could probably stay with us, for this next segment here, because we're going to be talking a bit about Ibrahim Traore. And before you go, let me ask you, what have you gotten a sense of the impact of the developments in the Sahel region in Ethiopia? What's happening there in relation? Because I understand that there's a sort of groundswell across the continent of support for the leaders in the Sahel, particularly Ibrahim Traore.
Well, the word on the ground is not one place, but the whole of Africa wants to support. The leaders of the different states mightn't see the movement at the moment, but all the people in Africa really don't want this thing to go back to same old.
Right.
So we are trying our best. We're working our best to try to educate and facilitate the people with as much knowledge as, because it's not today we're doing this, right? And we welcome a young, vibrant leader that could be an example to all the older heads and to the people who are willing to say enough is enough. Let us stand up for something, because if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything.
Shabaka, I think we need to bring Brother David into the show by now.
Let's do so. Thank you very much, Brother Levi.
I'm here with you. More love.
Yes, welcome, Brother David Abdullah.
Thank you very much, Brother Shabaka, Dr. Fergus, and Brother Trini Levi. And let me just say that several years ago, on the issue of the plight of Trinidad and Tobago nationals who had gone to Ethiopia, there was a problem with respect to them getting some Trinidad and Tobago documentation, I think the renewal of their passport or something like that. And I had reached out on behalf of the brothers and sisters of All Mansions to the then Minister of National Security, Brother Trini will remember that, who was then Stuart Young, in an attempt to get the government to facilitate the fast tracking of their documentation. And I don't know if that ever happened, but I did make representation. So as Brother Trinity Levi was speaking, I remembered that, and somewhere in my email system, I have that documentation. So, that's a very important issue.
Brother David, you're telling us if the show was last week, this could have influenced the election. It could have been worse for the people.
Would have been one more strike. I don't know if it's 3 strikes and you're out, but this was the amount of strikes they had. But the other thing is that, Brother Shabaka, if you remember when we were in Caracas in January, there was a sister who is based in Burkina Faso, Sister Inem, and she may not be there right now, but she's still in the Sahel region. So I was thinking of organizing a Tuesday talk with her at some point in time. I'm certain you'd want her on Indaba.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned it, Brother Abdullah, we did have her on Indaba, and she was brilliant. At the time, she was in Burkina Faso when we spoke to her, and her reporting from what was taking place on the ground was incredible and inspirational, I have to say.
Yes.
I just want to remind everybody that at 8:30, in the next 3 minutes, we're going to have to excuse our radio audience for 2 minutes for the Lotto Plus draw. So we're gonna continue until 8:30, and let's hope we could save all the juicy stuff for after the Lotto Plus draw. But we're talking about the local elections, Brother Abdullah, and I know you've been commentating, across the board on what's happening, and you and I had a chance to talk before the elections about what might happen. And so, the unexpected.
Well, yeah, unexpected, yes and no. When we spoke, I was saying that this election would have been somewhat difficult to predict. And therefore, I was saying could be very close, 21-20 either way. Or if there was significant momentum, given the fact that the UNC, in fact, had a much better campaign, if there was significant momentum going the way of the UNC, that it could end up being 24-25. As it turned out, it was 26. I think that reflected, and a number of people have said it, even people within the PNM now are saying it. I don't know why they weren't saying it before within the party and trying to get the party and the leadership to shift course. But it reflected a rejection of the arrogance of power demonstrated by the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley in particular. The way in which he would dismiss people who raise genuine concerns on fundamental issues and so on, and attack them. And, the attitude of, I could take the 40-something% increase because I deserve it, because I work for it. But public servants, you only deserve 4% basically. And another minister famously said, well, if you can't afford it, then use a coal pot or ride a bicycle. That kind of attitude demonstrates the arrogance of power. And I think that large numbers of people, including significantly large...
To take a quick minute and go to the Lotto Plus draw at this moment and come right back to Indaba.
By independent auditors KPMG and presided over by the National Lotteries Control Board.
Yeah, we are also on social media, so we can't afford to stop the conversation. We'll continue. So continue, David.
Thanks, Dr. Fergus. Yes, so, the neoliberal policies of the PNM, and you remember, Shabaka, we had some long conversations when we were on the bus or something like that in Caracas earlier this year about neoliberalism. But Dr. Rowley had said shortly after the 2020 elections on public television when he was interviewed that he had no problem with the rich getting richer once they create opportunities for the poor. Now that is classical neoliberal economics where the rich get richer.
Trickle-down economics, to be specific.
And then a little bit trickles down to the masses. So to put it in another way, as we would talk about it, that a few people get the cake and the masses get the crumbs, or scrums, Australians would say. So people have been hurting in this country for a long time. And the PNM quite clearly was not in touch with that reality, did not understand or feel the pain. The closure of Petrotrin affected a lot of people, which I think was central to the PNM's loss of Point Fortin and Labre, where a lot of the people in those communities would have felt the closure, not just of the refinery, but the changed circumstances of those few workers who got employed by Heritage, and the loss of significant support to the fence line communities over the years. And all of those things added up. And so I don't think it was surprising. The UNC's campaign, of course, had a very popular, catchy song and phrase, when the UNC wins, everybody wins. And they gave examples of that and the things that they would do to make you win when the UNC wins. Some of them, of course, may not be realizable in the short term, but it certainly attracted the attention of people because it was dealing with people's daily lives, their bread and butter issues in a fundamental way. So it's also perhaps reflective of the fact that governments have not lasted more than 2 terms in Trinidad and Tobago since 1981. You had 81, the Chambers PNM government being elected, 86, the Robinson NAR, 91, the Manning PNM, 95 was a 18-18 tie, or right, 17-17, and then you had 2 in Tobago, and Mr. Robinson threw his lot in with Mr. Pandey, so you had a Pandey-Robinson government in that sense in 95. Mr. Pandey won in 2000 on his own, but in 2001 you then got the 18-18 tie and he lost, and so on. Mr. Manning won, but he didn't continue with 2 full terms because he called an early election in 2010. So, we have had Mrs. Prasad Bissessa lost after 1 election. So I think there's a process where people also think that it's important to change out those who have held office. And that is also maybe one of the factors that took place. Some people would have thought that the splitting of votes in some constituencies like Arangua St. Joseph, but Gary Griffith didn't have a big showing in Arangua St. Joseph. And similarly in Tobago, Watson Duke didn't have a big showing in Tobago East in particular, as well as the West. So that question of a third party taking votes from one or the other of the 2 traditional parties did not have a great impact. And in any case, given the huge momentum shift to the UNC in terms of and demonstrated by the loss of votes by the PNM, the PNM got, I think, 220,000 votes when you total up the 41 constituencies. The UNC, and that dropped from where they were in 2020 when they had 320,000 votes. So they lost 100,000 votes in this election. That is very, very significant. Not all those 100,000 went to vote for the UNC, yes, because the UNC did increase its vote count, but not by 100,000. A lot of people also did not vote. I was surprised by because the early reports in the media were saying there would be a high voter turnout, but the EBC has reported a 54% voter turnout compared to 58% in 2020, which was in COVID times, and 60-odd% in 2015. So the numbers of people who are participating has also declined, and I think that is something that we also have to look at, that people may also be disenchanted with the traditional electoral system as the key pillar of democracy, which of course it ought not to be the only pillar, but people are perhaps saying they want more democracy other than just 5 minutes in a polling booth and putting your finger in the red ink.
Yeah, that is an interesting perspective, Brother Abdullah. But today we had an interesting development where both Keith Rowley and a number of
Stuart
Young
and Rohan Sinanan
all resigned with immediate effect, opening the way for Penelope Beckles to take over the party. And of course, that comes with a whole slew of conspiracies about the election. I mean, I don't know if you want to comment on those developments.
Well, yeah, and of course, Mrs. Beckles Robinson is not yet. There's no leader of the PNM right now. as of tomorrow, when Dr. Rowley's resignation takes effect. I heard the news just before joining this program that the General Secretary of the party, Foster Cummings, said that there is no provision for an interim political leader in the PNM's constitution. And so what will have to happen is that there will have to be an election sometime later this year for the political leader. So there is no leader of the party at this moment. There's no political leader. There's no chairman of the party. There will be an executive, which I suppose will run the affairs of the party, and of course the general counsel. However, Mrs. Beckers Robinson has been identified as the person who will be the leader of the opposition in the parliament. Now, it was interesting that it seemed as if there was a bit of a two-stage process towards that, in that there was a letter that became public, signed by 7 members of the parliament, PNM members out of the 13, indicating support for her as the leader of the opposition, and that was addressed to Her Excellency the President. But apparently at the General Council meeting this evening, the entire General Council voted unanimously that Mrs. Beckers Robinson should be the leader of the opposition. So the other 6 MPs who did not sign on to that letter would have to fall in line now, and therefore all 13 opposition members will endorse, or 12 other members will endorse her as the leader of the opposition. Now that places her therefore in the central position as the main spokesperson for the party, because there's no political leader, there's no party chair. The General Secretary lost his position in the parliament. So as the leader of the opposition, she will be the main spokesperson of the PNM, and clearly therefore puts her in the front running, so to speak, to become the political leader of the party whenever that election comes around. And she has a lot of experience, and many people were of the view that had there been an open election for the leadership of the PNM, say last year or early this year, or open the choice for the position of Prime Minister to succeed Dr. Rowley, then Mrs. Beckers Robinson would have prevailed and would have given a different image, certainly, to the PNM. Whether that would have prevented them from losing the election, nobody could say. That's in the realm of speculation.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Doctor, we have with us Dr. Fergus. Dr. Fergus, I got to bring you in. You are the chair of the Reparations Committee of Commission of Trinidad and
The
Tobago.
National Committee on Reparations, and we are going to shift focus a little bit. Of course,
Sure.
Brother David is, besides an economist and political activist, he is also an advocate for social justice, and therefore he would be very much attuned to the discussion on reparations as well. So let me give you a little background first. I think that's important for the audience. In July 2013, this Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, or Bisesa Prasad, is the one who signed the CARICOM agreement right here in Trinidad to establish the CARICOM Reparations Commission. And in 2014, she was in the seat of government when she endorsed CARICOM's 10-point plan for reparatory justice, and that same year also set up a National Committee on Reparations. And that committee was chaired by Brother Ayego Ome. In 2011, she was the Prime Minister when the United Nations declared the International Year for People of African Descent. And she was also at the helm of government for the United Nations Declaration of the International Decade for People of African Descent, which we now call the first international decade. And she is back at the beginning of the United Nations second decade, which started just in January, second decade for people of African descent. You know, and this time it's under the umbrella of the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, which was launched just about 3 years ago. Now, there's a big difference between when she exited office in 2015 and 2025, because the response to reparation is now a global phenomenon, which is much different from that uphill struggle where there was quite a lot of doubt about where we were heading, what kind of response we would be getting, and so on. And of course, the local Pan-African community remains very clear in its position that the government has a critical role to play in the pursuit of reparations and also in implementing the activities recommended during the second decade for people of African descent. Now, some of the issues that our committee and the CRC are concerned about would be bridging of the Atlantic divide between Africa and the Caribbean, that is the air and sea bridge, and there was a recent agreement which was signed. We would want to make sure that action is taken there towards actual implementation of regular flights and also some sea activity, mainly in terms of cargo ships and so on. We are also very much concerned about our young people in the prisons and the remand section. Over 60% of our young people face virtual imprisonment for no crime that they have been found guilty of. You know, those are matters which we aired on this program already. We are also concerned about strengthening the education policy on discrimination against African children. And of course, the Concordat, we can't let that rest. We also must be concerned about the Concordat, which to a great extent is at the core of the discrimination against people of African descent. So, having said that, I'm not necessarily addressing these issues, but David, what are your sentiments about reparations, reparatory justice, and the new regime that is coming in? We don't know yet who would be in charge of what. So this is just about what we expect and what we hope the government would address, and definitely not drop the ball with respect to the reparations committee, which happened in 2015. We're very, very concerned about that. Yeah. Over to you, David.
Yes. Thanks, Dr. Fergus. And I'm glad you gave that historical background, because it will be very difficult indeed for the incoming Prime Minister-elect, Mrs. Prasad Bissessar, to move away from the positions that she had taken as the Prime Minister at the time of the government of Trinidad and Tobago with respect to signing on to those United Nations declarations, the CARICOM declarations, and also establishing the first Trinidad and Tobago National Reparations Committee. So I think that that you and your committee, Dr. Fergus, are in a good place to be able to ensure that the work that you are doing is continued. And I agree. In 2015, there was a huge gap as the incoming government neglected or ignored the importance of reparations and the work of the Reparations Committee. So I think we are in a much better place this time around, given that past history which you described. And certainly what is necessary is for civil society, Emancipation Support Committee, Caribbean Freedom Project, the All Mansions of Rastafari, and 12 Tribes. Certainly MSJ we will add our voice to it in support of the call for the government to continue this important work, because it is central. Just when was it, last week, Wednesday or Thursday, or 2 Thursdays ago, Shabaka, that we were outside the French embassy demanding restitution and reparations by France to Haiti on the 200th anniversary of the extortion of money by France, 150 million gold francs as it was at the time in 1825, for the Haitian people daring to win their independence and for daring to end their being enslaved. And so we were demanding that France pays reparations and restitution to Haiti. So, and of course, Haiti is a member of CARICOM. So, I remember last year, I think it was Brother Trini Levi, on behalf of the MSJ, I made a call for the anniversary of the day when Emperor Haile Selassie came to Trinidad and Tobago to be declared not a national holiday, but a day of recognition of the members of the Rastafarian movement here, in keeping with the whole idea of reparations. And Brother Fergus, particularly after reading your book that you launched last year about about the way in which the
Spiritual
British,
baptism.
yes, the British dealt with the prohibition ordinance of the spiritual Shouter Baptists in St. Vincent first and then in Trinidad and Tobago, that Britain should really pay reparations to the members of the spiritual Baptist faith. So there are many dimensions, I believe, and we have to raise more awareness and consciousness. And I congratulate Emancipation Support Committee and the Indaba radio program for all the work that you're doing around these issues. So fully support the call, and be prepared to sign on to a joint statement as we have, excuse me, as we have done before, Brother Shabaka. And I know Sister Zakia is listening as well with Emancipation Support and Caribbean Freedom Project, and I'm sure the trade unions will join in as well, and MSJ, and we could get the women's organizations to support the calling on the government to ensure that this work of reparatory justice continues apace.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, I am sure Shabaka would want to speak to the issue of monuments, because the Monuments Committee submitted its report recently, and no action has been taken. We don't know if it was laid in Parliament. Well, I don't know. And definitely it wasn't made public besides the handing over. So that is part of reparatory justice as well that we need to address. But before Shabaka jumped in, Trini Levi, you were part of that first committee back in 2014, immediate launch. Who knows if you'll be back again. But what are your thoughts on the government's expectation, or your expectation, let's say, as a former reparationist on the committee, towards the agenda of the reparations movement? What are some of your thoughts?
After we left the first dispensation of the reparation committee, we had a very tough time trying to continue. We even take it upon ourselves and was doing certain works. So I would really like to see the committee fully financial as to when we need to, because when I was on the committee and I went to Barbados and I presented our findings, they were very happy. And I went to Jamaica also and I presented the findings that our committee, and they were saying that, boy, you all are real far ahead. But when we wanted to represent and go to certain function, we wasn't getting no money, as you know. And that was very bad for us, because some of our members were able to attend, but we wasn't really fully able to function in the capacity that we should have been functioning. So I hope that this time here, once we could come together and push the narrative that this committee is very vital towards us and towards the decade of the people of the second decade, I think we should really rally our people and really push that this committee be recognized with great emphasis.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I recall even the chair couldn't travel to Antigua to a meeting of the CLC itself. Over to you, Brother Shabaka.
Well, I think, Doc, you all are skirting around what I think is the elephant in the room here, which is the fact that, when the PNM government came into power, they neglected the National Reparations Committee. And I think, in a manner that was, that showed a great deal of contempt for its leadership. Dr. Brother Ayagoro has written extensively about his experiences and spoken about them. He was then chair of the committee. Eventually, the PNM government came around to organizing a reparations committee, of which you're the head now. The question is, will the next government choose its own committee again? Will it want to disband the current committee, or will it break with that tradition that the PNM established and continue working with the committee as it is currently organized, as is currently, and that is I think one of the major questions that we would want to answer tonight on tonight's program. what is the thinking in among us here in this room tonight?
Well, that question, Shabaka, something like a National Reparations Committee, the very name of it is national. And therefore, once the persons who are on it are qualified, and I mean, there's no more qualified person than Dr. Fergus in this regard, then, there's no need to change the committee because you really want a continuity of the work of the committee. And chopping and changing people suggests that somebody is there because of a relationship with the party in power, as distinct from being competent and able to do the work that is necessary. I think that we need to move away from this idea that every time a government comes in power. Now, obviously, there are other kinds of bodies, some state corporations and so on, where the chairman of a board, you want to make sure that that person is in sync with government policy. But for something like you can't have a different government policy on the question of reparations when we have signed on to the CARICOM 10-point plan on reparations and have drilled down on some of those issues in terms of the specifics of Trinidad and Tobago. So, I think we need to make that clear. That's my view. That's my view on it.
Yeah.
One of the things, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I can tell you because I think I know a little bit more about what goes on in the other territories that change of government, as far as I'm aware, has not affected those committees. We do have from time to time government neglect of the committee, not because of change of government, simply because things become lax at times. I know of some territories, some countries where that is happening. I would not want to name any particular place, but that is one of the concerns we have in Trinidad because it has happened before. So we are particularly concerned about that. And at this stage in particular, I think it would be a travesty if such a development happened. The committee ought to be a standing committee, as David said, the standing committee. And it is in place for a particular purpose, not to serve a particular government, but it is a government-appointed committee, and the government has the prerogative, of course, to change members of the committee, to change committee. But the important thing I, of course, would stress is that the committee ought to be fully supported by the government immediately upon the appointment of a minister, line minister. I think that's very important, that endorsement needs to be made public, that the government is committed to reparations, committed to the principles and the objectives of the CARICOM Reparations Commission and so on. I think that's very important. It's a statement that ought to be made and perhaps ought to be made publicly as well.
Agreed. Could I ask Dr. Fergus, who is the line minister, or who was your line minister in terms of the actual ministry?
The line ministry is and has been from the beginning the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, and the last incumbent was Dr. Avery Brown.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Mario the last time. Perhaps I can ask you: is Mario related to the minister, former minister?
Is which Mario is that?
Mario Brown.
Mariano
Brown.
No.
It's not.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Mariano Brown, one of Mariano Brown's brothers, is very involved in writing. Miguel Brown. He's a writer, poet, and so on. Yes.
Okay.
But Amory and Mariano, as far as I'm aware, are not related at all. Yeah.
So
I wasn't aware that the Committee on Monuments had handed in their report. I was actually, and this is a mea culpa, I was supposed to have submitted a memorandum on behalf of the MSJ and just didn't get around to writing it in time. Which was not good, because we normally try to make submissions on all these very important national issues. So that was a lapse on my part. But I do agree that report should be made public, laid in Parliament. It should be debated in Parliament so we know where everybody stands on these questions, and action taken very quickly. I think this is another area where civil society needs to make our voices heard, and not allow that report simply to die in somebody's waste paper basket.
Yeah, I think we have to. This is one of the areas where we could criticize the former PNM government because even though the Prime Minister did something that we would have all wanted to see in the removal of the 3 ships from the coat of arms, which is very much part and parcel of this whole conversation. It was done in such a way that alienated large segments of the population from the consensus that we were trying to build since 2017 when we launched this issue, myself and Dr. Fergus, at the national level for us to look critically at the people and values that we celebrate in our public spaces, but in particular those that we inherited from the colonial period. And so, the way that the issue was addressed by the government, I can tell you, it created a situation where people who you would normally expect to support that move felt were drawn into all kinds of conspiracy theories about it, and the cost of it were around related to the cost of it, all kinds of other things. And we're going to find ourselves now with an uphill battle this year because of the way that particular change was made, unfortunately. I have to be honest. I mean, my experience now since that decision has been made, my experience moving around, in schools, in African communities, the community centers and so on, the tone and the discourse has changed. From where we had brought the consciousness before that event was, because one of the things that the PNM did, and you saw it again when they dealt with the whole question of hair, which of course Brother Trini Levi and his community would be very concerned about, the way that African children's were discriminated against because of their natural hair up until the law was changed. But the government never took the next step to create the public education drive to facilitate the new legislative environment, the new environment that they had generated. So you have a law which says you can't discriminate against African children for wearing natural hair, but there are no programs that were put in place to bring the society to the point where teachers, fellow parents, fellow students could relate and accept the new hairstyles that they were going to see, or that the children themselves would be responsible about these new hairstyles that they were allowed to have, understanding what that law was about. The same thing happened with the coat of arms. We removed the 3 ships, but there's no conversation, there's no education drive to help people to understand what that was about. It wasn't simply about just finding a place for the steel pan. It was much more than that. There was a larger conversation that was taking place all around the world. We were actually celebrating genocide on our most important national symbol, and of course that goes completely against the values that we articulate. But the vast majority of the society was never made aware of that, because of course these decisions were made like if they were coming from some kind of dictator. This is what it's going to be tomorrow, and there's no conversation about it, no education material. I think that we have to call a spade, and the PNM has to take some responsibility for the way that it approached those changes. And I have to say that even though we applaud Dr. Rowley for his history-making endeavor, ultimately we may find ourselves having to roll the ball back up the hill to be able to continue the process of changes that we started in 2017.
Yeah, it's a very important point, because on the coat of arms there's still a crown, not so? And
that's the other issue.
What does that symbolize? And the whole announcement came out of what was supposed to be a process of consultation on constitution reform, because you had the National Advisory Committee on Constitutional Reform set up, a lot of fanfare. The members of the committee, well-known persons in our national community, did the work. They submitted a report, and the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, promised that there'll be a national consultation on their report to get consensus. That never happened. Instead, he called a PNM convention to discuss constitutional reform, and only one thing came out of that, which was to announce the change in the coat of arms. So that type of decision-making process, you're right, is really problematic, Shabaka. And I think all of that, if we come back to where we started earlier, may have contributed to the outcome on Monday, that style of leadership and so on. So I mean, you hear Dr. Rowley railing against colonialism and that kind of thing in some of his public statements, but then actions on other areas belied or didn't suggest that all of that was 100% what he believed, because if he really believed some of those things, he would action them. For example, allowing the National Committee on Reparations to lapse for several years. That isn't a reflection of somebody who is deeply committed to ending, the continuing impact and effect of colonialism. So I agree with you on those points. But it is for us now to try to make sure that the incoming government doesn't lapse on any of these issues and engages in support for the Reparatory Justice movement, support for the National Reparations Committee, and also addresses by laying the report on monuments in the Parliament and have a public debate. Let's have some, while there were consultations before, let us have a real national dialogue on these questions with education and information. Because as you know, Shabaka, there was one session I think you attended where there was a lot of nonsense being spewed by one or two people. Yes? So education and information is absolutely essential.
Yeah, those consultations didn't in any way, fulfill the need for the kind of education that our society needed, having been the victim of colonial narratives. Because these monuments, it's not just about the monuments. The monuments really represent narratives that have been embedded in our landscape in prominent places, through which we understand our past. And so there was we have not yet had a reckoning with these narratives. We have not yet had a reckoning. And just to sort of make this clear to people, when you go to school today, if you pick up the average literature on, if you Google Ralph Woodford on your thing, you'll find that there was a nice guy who was handsome, and he oversaw the development of Port of Spain, the box drains and the pavements and the concrete buildings, and he fixed up the botanical gardens. You will not hear that this man believed in segregation from the womb to the tomb. That he tried to stop people who were qualified as doctors and other professionals from practicing because they had one drop of black blood. That he tried to stop the Trinidad Literary Society. He stopped, in other words, to undercut the literacy of African people and so on. You just don't get those things from the literature. And that and Woodford Square and the statue that stands in the cathedral and the monument in the other cathedral, the Catholic cathedral, the statue in the Anglican cathedral, all these things tell a story that is patently untrue about Woodford. They only give you half a story. They silence the part about the aspects of Woodford's behavior that would have victimized and burdened our ancestors, and of course affect us up to today. The way that Woodford hardened the racial divide in this society affects this country up to today, and nobody would argue differently. But again, we would not get that from our past, and colonialism embedded their narratives, their notion, their version of history in our landscape, in stone and bronze and on streets. And this is what has to be addressed. And if there's no education to address these things, we're really not moving our society forward.
Just a note to that. Of course, we have had the opening of a new highway to Sangagandi. I was very concerned that they would name that highway the extension of the Churchill Roosevelt Highway. I expressed that concern publicly, and fortunately, they did not. And just to take a cue from what you're saying, Shabaka, that there's no education behind the change of names and change of logos and so on, change of symbols. The highway has been named after a former MP, Elmina Clark Allen, a well-known personality from the Sangagandi area. But even during the ribbon cutting, I don't think anybody knew who this woman was. And the highway is named after her, you know. So I think we need a little bit of that, you know, when we have a monument, because the highway now, that signpost in a sense is a monument to her, you know. And therefore, people ought to know, who was this woman? You know, how is it that her name was chosen to be up on the signpost, you know, as a name for the new highway? And people who didn't know her wouldn't know a thing about her, you know. So I think we really need that kind of educating and informing, you know, whenever these kinds of changes are made. We need to inform people of the reason behind it and something about the history behind it as well, because you can't just drop a name on people like that and expect people to really, you know, feel honored when they don't know a thing about the person.
Yeah. And, you know, if I could just say that, you know, a lot of people will not remember that what is now the Uriah Butler Highway used to be called the Princess Margaret Highway. Yes,
indeed.
And that name was changed, and you know, there was never a problem with the change, and so I can't remember how long ago that name change took place, but at least one, if not two generations now have grown up not knowing anything about the Princess Margaret Highway. So there's no reason why we should still be calling the highway East-West Highway, the Churchill Roosevelt Highway, or the Lady Young, or the Beetham, you know, the Beetham Highway. Those names could be changed, and without any difficulty, the society, the citizens will adapt to the new name, and in one generation, the old name will be completely forgotten.
Mm-hmm. And I think that there's more to this. I mean, part of the reason that we find it difficult to name new things, new streets, new highway extensions, and so on, is because we just don't know of our heroes prior to independence. We were able to get Butler and Cipriani, registered as heroes in a sense and honored. But the large majority, the vast majority of the people who distinguished themselves, fighting for our freedoms during the long night of colonialism, have been erased from our memory, and that leaves us as a people who is, you know, without roots, and we know what happens to a tree without roots. And so, so there's a lot more that has to go into this beyond each one of those colonial monuments hides or silences the history of many of our great ancestors. When I say that, not just African ancestors of all the people who live here across the board. And so we have a lot of work to do, if we expect to advance this process. Let me just share quickly with you that when Dr. Fergus says that this is a reparations issue, that in 2019, the 36th meeting of the Council for Human and Social Development, COSHOD, called for a coordinated regional initiative to rename monuments that glorify colonial violence. So right at the highest level of decision making in the region, these issues have been identified. These colonial monuments have been identified as problematic. And of course, 2 years prior to that, the CARICOM Reparations Commission resolve that all statues and memorials dedicated to persons who ushered and directed the genocide against Native people of the Caribbean, such as Christopher Columbus, and those who defended and practiced the crime of enslaving others, denying them their humanity, be removed from places of public celebration. So, there has been, there is an important and influential segment of the leadership at the regional level that understands these issues. But of course, we still have the challenge of addressing them, of addressing, the things that we're talking about on tonight's program. And of course, Brother Abdullah, Brother Dr. Fergus, Brother Levi, I will be approaching you all within the next few days, because we have a brother called Shervandazi Smith in the Bahamas, who has been convicted of for taking a sledgehammer in 2021 to the Christopher Columbus Monument in Nassau. And we are calling on the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, that is Philip Edward Brave Davis, to overturn his conviction for what we consider to be a courageous act of civic protest grounded in the highest ideals of the Caribbean conscience. And so I'm going to be approaching all members of civil society, to sign on to this letter to the Prime Minister of the Bahamas. And of course, we will be enlisting the chairs of the reparations commissions across the Caribbean, people like Dr. Fergus, Dr. Nyambi in the Bahamas, and others to use their influence on the Prime Minister for him to act.
Sure, we support that, Shabaka.
Thank you. I have no doubt.
Yes, well, I think we didn't notice when Talk City left us at the top of the hour. They stayed on for a little while, but we didn't get an opportunity to say good night to the listeners. And perhaps we need to look at the comments, Shabaka, to see whether David might have been addressed, and perhaps would like to respond to something of the on the chat group. Perhaps I don't want to touch my phone. I'm looking at my phone.
While I review the comments, David, somebody said to me tonight, I don't know if it's a rumor or what, that you called for Tobago independence on TV tonight.
No, I didn't call for Tobago independence.
So can you clarify what you called for tonight, brother Abdullah?
What I said, and I said it when I was on WESN on Monday night doing commentary with others, when I first learned that Tobago East had been won by the TPP, and then later on Tobago West was likely to go that way. What I said then was that the issue of Tobago autonomy would be back on the national agenda in a very serious way. And the people of Tobago have spoken because the TPP represents really the tradition of Tobago nationalism coming from the days of APT James, Fargo James coming through, A&R Robinson, Winston Murray, stalwarts like that who put Tobago nationalism on the agenda. And therefore Tobago autonomy is going to be squarely on the agenda of Trinidad and Tobago in the coming period. And that the whole country now has to re-engage that conversation, because it went south in the last government, and when it went south, it failed to happen in the last government. It's going to come back up again. And so that is what we need to address. I didn't say that I was calling for independence. Because Shabaka, that I try to be very careful with language, right? Because language is a hell of a thing. And words, of course, are important. Words matter. So I spoke about Tobago autonomy. Tobago autonomy does not equal independence, because independence means secession. And as distinct from autonomy, which means that Tobago ought to have the power to make laws relative to the development of Tobago and so on, and other things in terms of management of their financial resources and so on, to be able to fulfill the needs of the Tobagonians.
Yeah, I thought it was important to give you a chance to clarify for some of those listeners who thought that you had said something otherwise. In terms of our comments tonight, brothers and sisters, we have those who are thanking Brother Trini Levi for his information. I suppose there will be those that will try to reach out to him. Brother Bongo Grease has said that he would, he believes that the incoming Foreign Affairs Minister will work with the Reparations Committee. He has faith in that youth representative of the UNC. And of course, a brother Nigel Collins, early on in the program, he wanted to know if David was suggesting that the UNC policies will not be deeply capitalist and neoliberal. But of course, I think we know the answer to that question. But David, perhaps you would want to respond to Brother Nigel Collins.
Okay, so yes, that's a long conversation, Shabaka.
Yeah, but I think what he's to make it short, brother. I think what he's suggesting is that what he's getting at is that neither party, either the UNC or the PNM, would have had a distinctly different approach to the economic governance of this country.
That is correct. And so in my statement for celebrating May Day, which is tomorrow, International Workers' Day, I made the point that in terms of the labor movement, while April 28th was a step forward, the fundamental root cause of the problems that workers have, which is the fact that that big capital is still entrenched in terms of our economic system, and the system of governance is still the old colonial state in effect, that therefore a luta continua, the struggle must continue. So yes, I agree with Brother Collins and what you're saying in that regard. Let me just say in terms of what I said about independence, maybe what I did say was that I thought that the TPP should remain independent of the government, right? I wasn't saying that for Tobago independence. I just was trying to rethink one of the comments I made. In other words, that the 2 seats of Tobago, the 2 parliamentary seats of Tobago held by the TPP, that they should therefore remain independent, which will give them the most leverage to pursue the issue of autonomy, as distinct from, say, being part of the UNC coalition of interest government, which will then perhaps give them less leverage and less wiggle room. Now, that was the point I was making about independence, that the TPP should remain parliamentarian.
I can see how that would have. I can see how that could be misconstrued, brother.
I suppose.
All right, so let's take the opportunity tonight to congratulate the incoming government, the UNC government, on their victory. And to send out our condolences to the PNM, and our wish for the democracy of this country to prevail, to continue to be strengthened and to grow in the future. Dr. Fergus, any closing remarks from you, brother?
No, I think with a bigger mandate this time, we expect bigger things, of course, from the government. And my concern for tonight is with respect to reparations, of course. I would restrict my concern to that for this evening.
Yeah, Brother Trini Levi?
Yes, well, I want to say I hope that even on the reparation committee, that all the different fact findings that we have, we can transfer them to the public and the schools at large. Because if we do all of these things and we don't get it out there, the decade of the people of African descent, it ain't gonna have no meaning. We need to be able to get it to the schools and to the individual man out there. So that means we need to do something really, really serious in getting that education system to the people for the betterment of all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just let me clarify, because as David said, the words could lead to misconstruing meanings at times. So our concern as a reparation committee goes beyond the African community. It embraces as well the reparations for the indigenous peoples. Now, we in Trinidad and Tobago, we are the only committee that consistently advocates for the First Peoples in the CRC. We are the only one. So that every time issues come up, it is Trinidad and Tobago's representative, myself, and Chief Ricardo Barrett, that reminds them. Sometimes we actually have to remind them that, reparations are also about the indigenous people. So my concern goes beyond the African community and also includes the indigenous people. So that's the mandate of the National Committee on Reparations. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that.
Important, Dr. Fergus. Thanks for that contribution. David, your last words before we leave our listeners tonight.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on the program. A very important discussion as always. And secondly, I think that we need to ensure that these issues are placed in the national narrative and on the national agenda so that the incoming government is aware of its responsibilities on these key issues of reparatory justice and other matters related to that, the issue of our beginning to challenge and erase our colonial history with respect to monuments and names and so on, symbols. So I do think that we need to find ways in civil society to make sure that they are aware that these things are on the agenda, because our incoming government has a long list of things that people want to have done and all done right away. And unless we raise our voices to make sure that they're aware of this issue, it could drop down the list of priorities.
Indeed. Thank you very much, brother. And on that note, we want to wish all our listeners and viewers a good night and invite them to join us again next week, Wednesday, for another edition of Indaba, the place where knowledge grows, the place to find consensus, the voice of the people, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee. Good night, Doctor.
Good night, my brother. Until next week.